There, first went right to the chat. Now no one can.
Hello, Internet. This is Rhys, the Matt of the Great Plains. I am here on this end of the Internet to bring in the Mattriarchy to you. Also, there on the eastern coast where it's colder and darker, probably not colder, except it being later at night, is Matt McGibson.
Hello, everybody.
So we have no viewers so far, but we're just going to carry on as though we do. I don't know exactly when. We are expecting Pope Fire to show up at some time and try to tell me how Kingdom Come is the next great work or the last great work or something. But I'm not going to get into this too much until we get to that, though. So,
talking about the great works of Mark Waid. Were you ever really a big fan of Mark Waid? Like prior to all this crazy stuff that's come over the past couple of years, like were you ever a fan of Mark Waid?
Yes. I first got into Mark Waid's stuff when he did the Return of Barry Allen storyline in The Flash back in, I want to say 94, 95, somewhere in there. And not going to spoil it, but it didn't actually end up changing the continuity at all. But it was just after they introduced, he was on Flash for a number of years, actually finally married off. Wally West had him grow from being an out-of-place adolescent into being a grown man, taking on responsibilities, thinking he's going to die, introducing the Impulse character, all kinds of stuff. I thought Mark Waid did some awesome stuff back then, and I really, really liked it. And actually, when I first read Kingdom Come, just shortly after it came out, because I didn't have the scratch to put down for the individual issues, I bought the trade way back in the day, and I was convinced for a number of years that it was just a masterpiece. It was one of the greatest comic stories ever written. And in the last couple of years, I don't want to get too much into that, but in the last couple of years, I've just kind of changed my mind on it. Hey, Pope Fire, I see you just joined us. How's it going?
Hi, I am so sorry. My Facebook was super delayed on that invite.
That's fine. That's fine. I was just introducing the topic in a way that we weren't going to actually talk about it yet. So.
Well, thank goodness. Not too late.
Not at all. Not at all. So, have you ever met Matt?
No, I have not.
So,
I imagine you're for something like McJerkface, but I'll forgive you.
Oh, yeah. Are you a Raven fan? Is that why?
My name is Matt McGibson, but I tend to go by Matt McJerkface on various social media sites. And it gets a kick out of a lot of people. But yeah, nice to have you here. Thank you.
Yeah, Kingdom Come is one of my favorite books of all time. So, of course, I'm going to want to talk about it. It's legit like one of the books that I've owned multiple copies of because I just wear them down. I read it that much.
So, very good. There is
the chat is Nacho.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Nacho has joined us in the chat as well. So, hey there, Nacho. Staying up all night, I guess, right now. What is it? It'd be, I think, 2 a.m., wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's 2 a.m. there. Yep. Because I am GMT -7. So if it's 7 o'clock here, that means it's 7 hours later, 14. It goes over, so it's 2 in the morning there. So that's dedication. We thank you, Nacho.
Yeah. Nacho would also like to share a unpopular opinion. Original Old Man Logan is better than Kingdom Come.
Ooh.
I think a lot of people have sort of grown a distaste for Kingdom Come because of stuff with Mark Waid. And I want to remind people that Mark Waid only co-wrote it, and he'll even admit that a lot of what was done was Alex Ross's doing. A lot of the characters were from Alex Ross. Really, Mark Waid was only in charge of like some dialogue. And when you think about Kingdom Come, it's not really the dialogue that sticks to you. It's always going to be the art. It's always going to be how beautiful it was, how different the story was at the time. I mean, the one piece of dialogue that I always remember from the superheroes is when Superman and Batman are having a conversation, and Batman points out the Superman's like got the black on his logo. When Superman's like, well, I don't really have any inner dark. He's like, well, then what's the black for? Yeah, I think people have sort of got this distaste for Mark Waid, and I don't blame them, but I also think that it's kind of unfair to hate a book series that Mark Waid only had a small part in.
Well, I think that's a very legitimate point. And I definitely would say that that is part of my migration away from Kingdom Come. But I do want to, before I get into my story, you're the guest. I'd like to hear about your introduction into Kingdom Come and what it meant for you coming up reading comics. Because you had said, I think on Twitter, that was one of the first books that kind of hooked you into the genre. Am I remembering that right?
Okay, so before then, I only read New Teen Titans. The first comic book I ever owned was so technically the first comic book I've owned was an Archie one, but the first superhero one I owned was a library copy that accidentally got donated to a it's like a poor man's Goodwill, and somebody accidentally donated it, and the guy there gave me, he was really close to my parents, and he gave me a whole bunch of comic books for free. And Judas Contract was the one that I read over and over and over again. At the time, because I believe I was 8 or 9, the Teen Titans cartoon was going on, and I didn't connect that the Teen Titans cartoon and New Teen Titans was the same characters. But my brother told me that Robin and Starfire and Beast Boy and Raven got married and had kids, and I was a really old child. I was like, really? Like, did that really happen? So I went to my comic book shop and I asked them, I was like, did Robin and Starfire ever have a kid? And they told me in Kingdom Come they did. So I picked up Kingdom Come, which is technically one of my first books that didn't have Starfire in it. Because before then, all my other books were Teen Titans based. And while Kingdom Come does have a lot to do with the Teen Titans, or a small portion to do with the Teen Titans, because it is a Superman story, it wasn't like they weren't a big focus. It was one of those things that got me to look into other DC characters and other superheroes in general. Like I think I started reading X-Men after that as well.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, and we were talking about this last week. I think there's a point at which you move from being curious about superhero comics into it being an obsession, and yeah. I think there's different points at which it goes from like, this is a cool idea, into, my goodness, this is my life now. And
I think I've owned, because I have the Absolute Edition. I've owned 8 copies of Kingdom Come, because over the years I just read it so often the pages would fall out, so I'd have to go to Barnes and Noble and buy another one. But I have a collection edition, the Absolute Kingdom Come. I've owned a whole bunch of Barnes and Noble copies. It's just one of those books that I constantly find myself going back to read, and it's because I really enjoy the art, and the story is pretty good too. And I don't usually like those stories that end on sort of a where all these characters die and stuff. I usually avoid those because I like to be happy, but it is one of those stories that I just fell in love with, and it was the one that kind of kicked off the obsession from just comic to just Teen Titans to comic books in general. I'm more of a Raven fan. Yeah, good job, Nacho.
Yeah, I just wanted to read a couple things off the chat as we were going to. I do really love what you guys are saying, though. Like, I love having people hearing these positive conversations and stories about comic books. But here we have Booster Kiwi says, "What do we have here? Have you stolen my actual waifu?"
Yeah, I don't usually go on streams without him, so.
I kind of want to feel bad, but I don't. Is that wrong of me? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Thundero the Right says, well. I just think he's a big fan of water-based structures. You got wells. I'm more of a fountain guy.
You're going with it, but your delivery on that needs a little work.
I need some.
We need to dig deep, Matt.
Need coffee.
And then the nutrition. Oh, darn it! I messed my own joke up.
All right, let's see. Yeah, Nacho Correxus says 2 a.m. Alex Ross did most of it. Wade cleaned up the dialogue. I guess the experts. Is that true?
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah,
When
Wade
Nacho said,
mainly did the dialogue. Like he didn't really. This was Alex Ross's baby. That's why when people are like, "Well, Mark Wade wrote Kingdom Come," it's like, no, he really was. He was more like he did put some. You can still see some of his fingerprints, but it's mostly Alex Ross's baby.
Well, and like we were talking about earlier, Matt and I were talking about that. You know, was I ever a Mark Wade fan? And in fact, his Flash stuff was awesome, and his Captain America stuff was awesome. But there was a difference that I could tell before and after he was involved in Kingdom Come with the products he was producing. I think in some ways, Kingdom Come was like his White Album, where it got a lot of praise, it got a lot of respect, and then that was sort of like creatively it for Mark Wade.
I would say that. I do think Mark Wade has got some good titles under his belt, and I definitely know that he is a good writer when he puts effort into it. But what it is he's gone fault. I think he's guilty of some stuff, and that's why he's been white knighting so much. Because usually guys that white knight that often are usually the ones that were doing the stuff that they're trying to defend. And that's just my experience from knowing guys and from being a woman, and to usually stay away from the guys that white knight so hard, because they're usually the ones that are the creepy guys, the ones that the feminists complain about.
Well, I'm glad you said it, not me. So back onto the story though. So what are the things about the story that drive it home to you the most there, Popefire?
I love the art because every panel has something going on. It's not like you can open the book, find any panel, and there's something there, and it's always beautifully done. There's just like you can look at the backgrounds of some of these panels, like when you go to the fight at the end, and you can see parts, and it's just it's so beautiful. And it's so much fun to play sort of like this Easter egg game, and every character, even if they're in the background, they look like a character. They look like they could come alive, and that's what I love the most about this. It doesn't really feel like any character kind of gets ignored because there's so many characters in this, but they still get panel time. They still get seen. They may not all get dialogue, but you can still see them, and you can still see that they're there, and it makes the world feel so much bigger. You know?
So I'm flipping through my copy. I only have the one. So I definitely can't claim to be as invested in it as you are, because I've only read it a handful of times, but I also internalize a lot of stuff. I will go ahead and point out right there. You guys can see that on the screen. It's Atlantis as imagined by Alex Ross. So that's pretty awesome.
Oh,
I am a giant Aquaman fan, so I was flipping. I said that's gotta go on the screen. We gotta show that one off.
Even B-list characters or D-list characters like Deadman are just so beautifully drawn, and it's like every panel. And I know that he used models for a lot of these, and it's just Alex Ross is so talented, and this guy, like every page of Kingdom Come is just it's like eye porn. Your eyes, it just feels so nice for your eyes. And the colors on it are so bright, but they're so soothing at the same time. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little too fangirly.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So. I guess now is probably a good time for me to go on talking about why my journey with the story, right? And it doesn't actually start with Kingdom Come, right? I read it when I was 20, probably 20, 22, something like that, when it first became accessible to me in the trades. And I was just overwhelmed by it. It's a story of enormous scope, right? And it causes these characters and it digs them down to the very bottoms of them, and it just it's got some really super creative ways of dealing with conflict in ways that are really cool. And the thing about it, you were talking about not liking the end of it, because it's kind of down, right? Everybody dies. Well, not everybody, but lots of people die. There's lots of death at the end of this great climactic thing. That didn't bug me. Liking and growing up with war movies and John Wayne westerns, and the idea that, you know, some people don't make it out alive is something that's just part of middle 20th century man's entertainment, right? Spinning out from the Western, spinning out from World War II. That's just part of life, and it became part of fiction. And even though I'm not mid-century, you know, my dad grew up in the mid-century, and so when we went to the Blockbuster, he got John Wayne movies, and he got that kind of stuff. So so I grew up watching the same movies my dad grew up with, right? So that wasn't the part that got me about it. One of the things I really liked about it was how hopeful it ends with, right? So you go through all this stuff, and it starts down, and it gets darker, and then at the end of it, it ends with an upbeat, right? And that's one of those things where you can see that they're going to be rebuilding their world, and I always liked that, right?
Oh,
And
you misunderstood me.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you misunderstood me. I know Kingdom Come would not work without the deaths, and I understand that. Like, I tend to stay away from stories where there's a lot of death, but Kingdom Come is just so amazing, and I love that ending where Superman's right at the end of the atomic bomb, and Superman's just sort of sitting there, and you don't really see what's around him until a few panels later, where he stands up, and then you see, or no, he's still sitting there, and he's got all these dead bodies, like all these skeletons around him. But the ending sort of makes it like it brightens it up, because Superman and Wonder Woman are going to have a baby, and it's like bringing new life into a world where a lot of death happened. And usually I stay away from stories that have a whole bunch of death. And with Kingdom Come, it didn't really bother me as much, and I really enjoyed the story because I understood that all that death had to happen. Because with modern comics, a lot of death happens just for shock value. It's not really there to like increase the story value or invest readers. It's just there to kill off certain characters because certain writers don't like them.
Right. Or even to just as a point to move along another point.
Yeah.
And here, that is a real poignant image right there. I want to go and put that up on the screen since I've got the book here in front of me.
Oh my goodness, that is beautiful.
I mean, you're absolutely right that is a necessary part of this story. But what I was trying to get at was, I think the reason you find it appealing, if I can venture a guess, is because it rebuilds from there, right? That it doesn't end with the destruction. That's a consequence. It's a realistic consequence, but that's a building block for that end of the story, for that restitution, for that the seeds for the future, right? You know, and I think that's that's part of the formula that I'm really familiar with. So I picked up on that, and I always liked that about the story, that it does not, it goes through these things and takes you through these things, and it emotes that, but it picks it up at the end and says, you know, this is just a phase. This too shall pass, and the future could be brighter because of the things we've suffered through. And I think that's in terms of a narrative, that's a beautiful thing. So I lost train of what I was going to say, though.
Well, if I can just point something out for a little bit. When Mark Waid did the Kingdom, which was a mini series, and you can tell which parts Alex Ross did in the Kingdom Come, because that series was 110 times better. As much as I love the Kingdom issues, it kind of just felt like a generic superhero story for a lot of them. And I mean, people know that I like Nightstar's design because I get commissions of Nightstar all the time, because I'm gonna get crap for this, but I actually prefer the way Nightstar looks compared to Starfire. Like, I just find Nightstar's design so much more appealing. But Mark Waid did the Kingdom miniseries thing. It kind of ended, like, what they did was they were trying to go back in time to fix a bunch of stuff, and it was just really weird. But it just felt like a generic superhero story, where with the Kingdom, which you can tell that Alex Ross mostly did, it was just this big epic story, and every panel meant something. Every word meant something. You know, it wasn't just this generic superhero story. It really was something that at the time was revolutionary.
Absolutely. So I remember what I was saying. I was going to talk about the story of my disillusionment. Okay. So, like I said, when I was a young man and I read this, and it was one of those seminal works that everybody agreed was just remarkable, right? And so you had Watchmen, and you had The Killing Joke, and you had Kingdom Come, and you had the book Constantine, right? And you had these keystones that were the definition of the high class that comics could be, the serious storytelling that comics could be, and that was just something that that I was really into, and there was all of these themes and all of this grandeur behind a lot of these stories. And a couple of years ago, I had a buddy who wrote an essay on how The Killing Joke was horribly misogynistic, right? It was patently anti-woman, not just that he had done a hateful thing, but that the structure of the story itself was anti-woman. And I read my friend's essay, and I kind of saw where he was coming from, but it didn't hit my memory right. So I went back and I read The Killing Joke, and what I realized in The Killing Joke is that there is one character in The Killing Joke, and that's Joker. And everyone else is a cipher. They're just a plot device to move it along. And these ciphers have reactions that are kind of like character, but none of them really develop at all. And it ends in a way that detracts from any moral puissance that the story has. And I was taken aback to be 35, 36 years old and questioning something that I'd held as near gospel truth for a decade and a half, right? And it was shocking to me. And so I started thinking back over these halcyon books, right? These golden tier of comic storytelling, and I found quite a few of them that were wanting in lots of ways. And one of those I feel is Kingdom Come. Now, I don't think it's wanting self-contained, right? I think if you look at the volume as it is, right, and this is the beginning and the end of it, I think it works pretty well, right? But it didn't stay inside of the volume, right? The elements in the book leached into the DC universe, and I really feel they poisoned the DC universe to the point where it was irreparable. And that's why they had the whole New 52 launch and various things about that. I think there's some other mechanics in there too, but I think that some of the fundamental premises of Kingdom Come that allowed it to work as a story, if you goes into the DC universe as a whole, it's a cancer, right? And at least that's my supposition. I could talk about that in a little detail here in a little while. But that's why I think that while I think for itself, it probably is something akin to a masterwork. When you look at it in terms of a grand scoping universe, it's not what it maybe ought to be. Or either that editorial should have said, no, this goes no further. I mean, I'm sure you know that when Alan Moore originally pitched Watchmen, he wanted to take the Charlton comics characters, and he would have just ruined them, never be useful to anyone ever again. And so the editorial at DC said, no, come up with your story, seems interesting, and we like to publish something like it, but figure out some different characters because you're not going to wreck the Blue Beetle. We have plans. You're not going to wreck the Question. We have plans.
Well,
and so I think, I don't know how to wrap up my sentence, so go ahead.
I'll argue with you there and say that it wasn't Kingdom Come that poisoned DC. I think it was writers not respecting characters that poisoned DC. Because with Alex Ross, he respects every character he uses. With other writers at DC, they all just want to write Batman, and they all just want to be super meta and just hurt other characters because they don't feel like the books that they're on that they deserve to be there, if that makes sense. They think that they should all be on like Superman or Batman or one of the Trinity stuff. And I'll argue that again, it's DC writers just not respecting their characters, not wanting to be on those characters. And I do know that maybe Kingdom Come influenced that a little bit, where they were like, well, he did this, maybe we can do that. But I don't think it was Kingdom Come in general. I really do think it's just people that are super petty and just wanted to poison the water. But that's just my opinion.
I definitely think that's a role, that's an element, aspect of all of that. But one of the things that Kingdom Come requires in the storytelling is that the heroes fail, right? I mean, well, that's the initial setup. Is that the efforts of the classic DC heroes have been so ineffectual that they've allowed the world to fall apart, and then when the world has fallen apart, Superman has left. Right now, that's the starting point, and that's not necessarily a terrible way to go with a story. But that is an idea of a seed. I think is a problem, and I think you're pointing out that other writers coming in and trying to ape those ideas are definitely a big factor. And I don't want to speak terribly ill of the man because he is a great talent, but I think a lot of Jeff Johns' work in many of the big event elements stem from that same impulse, and I think that was greatly detrimental too.
Oh, I'll agree with you there. I'll agree.
Yeah,
with
I mean, like, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I will agree with you there because I think Jeff. He does have some good books behind his belt, but he's also. I think that a lot of the big events he's been allowed to do kind of don't work out too well.
Well, and it's like one of those things, and I gotta this really dates me, right? But I gotta point back to if you'll ever read any of the behind the scenes essays about the stuff that led up to Nightfall, right? Danny O'Neill was like the king of the castle, right? He wanted to encourage ideas about coming up with what would it be like if somebody else was in Batman's role, and how unique is Bruce Wayne, and what is his character, and all this kind of stuff. But there are stories that you'll hear from Doug Monk or from Chuck Dixon where ideas just got axed, and like, no, you're not even touching that, you're not even broaching that thing, because we have to have stories that come after. And then he was real mindful of what is the status quo going to be after that. And I look at even the first Titans arc that Johns wrote, right, where he irrevocably changes Impulse's character.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And like, him as Kid Flash had some merits to it, but he was never as charming, I don't feel, once he wasn't Impulse anymore. There was never that fire that the character had where it was just a lark to read.
Well, he wrote them off like he wasn't a kid. Like, that was a lot of the issues. He wrote a lot of them off like they weren't children anymore, or like they weren't teenagers. Yes, there's going to be some issues growing up and stuff, but for the most part, teenagers, or mostly children, they want to be happy. It takes, like, they're not going to be 100% depressed all the time. And I think that's one of the things that he uses when he writes, is just constantly making these characters depressed. And when your characters are depressed, your readers aren't going to be or aren't going to be happy, because they're going to be depressed too.
Well, and that's one of the things where and where drama is easy, right?
Yeah.
Comedy is hard, right? But that's one of those things that on two, it's easy to write people in a way that's going to traumatize them. You look at the different difficulty between writing Tim Drake, whose parents are still alive, versus Tim Drake, who's now an orphan. There's just a world of difference in the mechanics that go into it with more moving pieces. And I think that was one of those things that didn't ruin Tim Drake's character, but the identity crisis was vastly detrimental to what he could be as a character.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's not the point. That's not of the conversation, though. But one of the things we have that I do think, and once again, you know, Kingdom Come is a capsule, right? It has a beginning and it has an end in itself. But a lot of those kinds of themes got used just shortly after. And then Mark Waid and Grant Morrison really heavily pushed their idea of hypertime, trying to incorporate their stuff that didn't fit continuity into continuity. And then we just have this slight tweaking of things that I feel kind of killed hope in the DC universe. Slowly, death by a thousand cuts. Which, you know, once again, I would agree with you, is not Alex Ross's fault. But I do think that was a seed.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. I mean, I can see that. I just feel like it kind of boils down more to just petty writers, and I guess we'll, because I do kind of see the point there. I do understand that. I just don't personally believe that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we look at Marvel with, what was it, Marvel Ultimatum or something, where they just did all this like gory, unnecessary stuff. Where like I believe it was the Blob ate and stuff, and it was just depressing, gory stories. And I think that comic books in general have sort of gone and lost that hope, because some of their most known characters just don't have hope anymore. And Spider-Man's a character that generally was one of those characters that would balance his superhero life, and there was, you know, sort of that dilemma where it was like, what do I give up to be Spider-Man, and what do I give up to be Peter Parker? But it was still never one of those things where it consumed all of him. Like, it was still, for the most part, a hopeful character.
Now, total sidetrack here. Have you ever had, speaking of Spider-Man, have you ever had the chance to read Charles Vess's Spider-Man Spirits of the Earth?
No, I haven't. I don't actually read a lot of Spider-Man. I've read some of the other issues, and then I read the issues with the black suit, and then I read a handful of Scarlet Spider, but I'm not as invested into Spider-Man as I am with DC, because I like Marvel. I just love DC.
Right. No, I'm the same way too. But I lucked across a hardback copy of this comic. It's completely watercolored, right? And Charles Vess is the guy that did and painted Neil Gaiman's Stardust. And he's done some different stuff on Sandman and stuff too. And I happened across this at a thrift store, and I said, this has to come home with me. I have to know what's inside of it. It's got Charles Vess. It's watercolored. It's hardback, and it's an amazing story. And it's a Peter and Mary Jane married, and they take a trip to Scotland, and it's a whole thing. It's this quirky and unbelievable like blending of like the mystic and the sci-fi, and Spider-Man's entirely out of his element, and Mary Jane is an active participant in the story, and it's nuts. It's an amazing story. But one of the things that Vess does with it that I think is so impressive is that he talks about that conflict between the personal and the professional, if you will, right? The superhero versus the normie life, in a way that it's entirely about that, but it's also not about that. You know what I mean? And it's a remarkable work. So I recommend anytime, and it's also beautiful, ridiculously gorgeous. So if you're into Spider-Man at all, or if you like the Peter Mary Jane dynamic, definitely seek out Spirits of the Earth, because it's totally worth the time.
I definitely will. I do have to go.
Okay.
To play some Overwatch. Thank you for having me on this stream. I love Kingdom Come. So I hope to see you next week, Titans. I don't know if we're not doing next week because of the holidays. We're gonna skip the next 2 weeks and then go on the 3rd of January. So I will see you then, or hopefully I'll see you then.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking Kingdom Come, and your passion for it has encouraged me to. I was planning on reading it again anyway, but it's getting bumped up the list for sure. And I want to thank you for being so gracious and telling me how wrong I was. So
You know I love you. All right, thank you for having me on. You have a great night.
All right, yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming.
So there you go, internet land, and all of our 8 viewers, or however many it is, probably 7. If checking.
We got to 10 at one point. I was so proud of us, Matt.
I know. I was amazed. I tell you what, Pope brings the fire. That's what it is. But dude, okay. But no, that was a great discussion, and that's I am super stoked to read that again. I mean, it was on my rotation to go back and reread anyway. But that's cool. That's very cool. I'm excited. So, side note, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you talk here in a little bit here, Matt, but I did want to go ahead and spend a little bit of time doing a quasi-humble brag. It's not really about me, though. So, I got the chance, I have had the chance over the last couple of years to make the acquaintance and something a little more with Ron Fortier, who is a comic writer, and he lives down in Fort Collins, so he's just a couple of hours from here. And we met in the local con circuit. He is the fellow, and the reason I know him is that he redesigned the Green Hornet continuity in the 90s when Green Hornet was being published by Now Comics. And he designed a continuity where every Green Hornet comic story from 1937 up until then was part of a single continuity. And it was a great big thing. It was awesome. And he is the writer of Alex Ross's first published comic work. It was a miniseries called Terminator Burning Earth. And Ross did painting and work on that one. And it's quite cool. And but I got the chance to I bought it about a year ago. I've been meaning to write up a review for it, and I haven't gotten that done yet because I'm a slacker. But on the subject of Alex Ross, there you go. That his work on Burning Earth got him the attention of Marvel and Kurt Busiek, and that became Marvel's, and there you have it. The rest is history. So
that's actually a really, really cool story. Thank you.
Yeah. It's quite a deal. So Dark Horse just recently re-released Burning Earth. They got the rights from the people that own the Now catalog. And what was that?
Terminator, as in like the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator?
Yeah. Yep.
I'm definitely looking for something. I'm definitely looking for a Terminator with Alex Ross art. Like, that's going on my list.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And so this part of the story with the thing is that Now had the license to do Terminator stories in between the original Terminator when it was released and when T2 came out. And when T2 was about to be released, they lost the contract to Dark Horse. His Dark Horse came in and said, our distribution is better, our talent pool is better, and they weren't wrong. And so the Terminator Burning Earth was originally, like, the storyline that Ron had been telling was the storyline that led up to the what's his name being sent back, Rhys. What's his first name? Doesn't matter. The guy who goes back in time to rescue the princess. I mean the John Connor's mom. And it was supposed to tell the story leading up to that. And so before there was a Terminator 2, the Burning Earth was originally set to be the last, like, 4 issues of the series, and then they repurposed it as a miniseries when they got Ross on to paint it. He did that right after graduating art school. So that's cool. But that's, So what do we have anybody has questions in the chat? Because I spent the whole last half hour just yakking.
I mean, it was a wonderful discussion. Like I said, I've never read Kingdom Come, but I felt like I learned a lot just by listening to the two of you. And there was clearly a lot of passion, not just for Kingdom Come, but for the entire medium of comics. Like, you guys had some very good, level-headed things to say.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have a chance, you and all the readers, follow Pope Fire. I will eventually put her links in the description. I meant to do that before we got started, and I didn't. Because because I suck. But she does a show most Thursdays called Titans Thursday, where a bunch of folks, and I guess I'm in the club now, get together to talk about Titans characters and their impact on the DC universe, which is just fun. So, and I'm a huge dork of a DC fan. So that's that.
Question: which one do you like more, Raven or Starfire? I guess it goes to the both of us.
Raven or Starfire? Well, you go ahead and go first, Matt.
Well, I guess when it comes to Titans, everyone gets weirded out when I say Cyborg is my favorite out of all of them, especially his characterization in the animated series. But out of those two,
So I have to ask the question. I'm going to interrupt you because I can tell you're thinking. But to the commenter, are you asking like in a Ginger versus Mary Ann sort of a way, or are we talking about their place in the narrative of the DC universe? Because that's a different question.
Personality-wise, I definitely really like Starfire. I love the ditziness and the innocence. Powers are pretty cool. I mean, Raven's really great in her own right, which is why I'd say it's kind of like apples and orange aliens.
I would say the esteemed Mrs. Rhys is far more like Raven than she is like Starfire. So take that for what it's worth. But she's not really like Raven either, but she's more like Raven than she is like Starfire.
I don't think I'd be able to apply either to my girlfriend.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, my wife's favorite game is Fallout. So she likes going around and, meeting out savage wasteland justice.
And I've got to get back into those. Now that I've finally got time again to jump into my backlog of games. Definitely looking forward to going back to Fallout. Especially, I want to try the third one. I think it's on Game Pass right now, and that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really enjoy that whole series. Now you are you done with school for the winter break? Is that starting already, or?
Yeah, I just as soon as I finish up these sketches for my art class, and I send those in. I'm actually a little behind on them. So like tomorrow at a certain point they're due, and I'm gonna send a picture to my art teacher. But as soon as that's over, I'm free for a good several, like maybe 5 weeks. Like end of January is when I go back.
That's just crazy. I mean,
the break was a lot shorter in high school, I swear.
I remember those days, but it's wild to think about, taking 5 or 6 weeks off of, life just because. I have a hard time thinking about that these days. I don't even get a week off of work most times.
So Nacho said, or back a couple minutes ago, he asked favorite hero. And how about you first?
My favorite hero is sort of a trick question because like I've been a hardcore Batman fan like my whole life, but I also like massively love Aquaman. Like probably the biggest Aquaman fan I know. I've studied the lore, I've studied the history, the various incarnations on it. I love Aquaman. And if you were to, I mean, like my top 3 are Aquaman, Jack Knight, Starman, and Batman. But I just love that. My current favorite series though is Silencer. I love that book. It's so freaking awesome. But
I'm behind a couple of issues, but I've been reading since the first one, and I've loved it.
And I should say of the big publishers, because I just picked up Punchline a couple weeks ago, and that universe inside that book is just, I've got to find out how that thing's put together. It's great. There's a lore that they allude to in the first 2 pages, and it's just like, now that's interesting.
Scott wants to know, or you as an Aquaman fan, are you going to see the Jason Momoa movie?
Yes, I absolutely will be seeing the movie.
You looking forward to it? Are you going to
Might even break my personal rule and go opening day. So I have to explain this because it hasn't been a long-standing rule. It's been about a year. But I don't go to movies opening day. I don't go to movies opening weekend. I don't go to movies any day except Tuesday because between Justice League, which I just was so sad about, and then The Last Jedi, Hollywood has just screw those guys. They don't get more than $5 out of me, and our local theater has $5 showings on Tuesday. That's how it works.
MCU though, like Marvel Cinematic
Universe. I don't care. The mouse can bite me. I don't no more than $5. That's just it. So, in fact, like I actually like avoided going to see Ant-Man and the Wasp, just because it was sort of like meh. I mean, I want to see it. I think it's probably going to be pretty good. The first Ant-Man was much better than I expected.
It was fun. Like it definitely didn't feel like it had the purpose that a lot of other Marvel movies had. Like, a lot of Marvel movies are setting up for another movie. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like a side tangent or like a dead end, but it's fun for what it did, for what it's worth.
Yeah. Also, and of course, I did see, oh, come on. Stupid thing. The Avengers. Yeah, Infinity War. That's the one I'm trying to say.
That was, I mean, I had such a ball at Infinity War.
I did see that on a Tuesday.
It reminds me of, okay, so in the terrible Street Fighter movie with Raul Julia, there's the part where, Chun-Li is like, you decimated my village and killed my father and everything. He's like, I don't remember that because the day the mighty bison graced your village may have been the most important day of your life, but for me, it was Tuesday.
No, that when he was filming that, he had already been terminal cancer.
Yeah, I know. He apparently did it for his kids. Like it really, like they loved the arcade game, and he was like, you know what, I'm gonna put everything I have into this for them. And the movie is dedicated to him, which is a bit unfortunate because he's like the one good part about it, other than kind of laughing at what's his name is Guile, Jean-Claude Van Damme.
So I have not seen that. My first exposure to Raul Julia, where I knew it was Raul Julia, because my first exposure was the Addams Family. When I first saw that, I wasn't into actors and things, so I hadn't picked up that was anything. But Julia did a made-for-TV, made-for-PBS movie in the mid-'80s called Overdrawn to the Memory Bank. And are you familiar with Mystery Science Theater there, Matt?
I want to watch it because people tell me that when I watch movies that I'm like a one-man Mystery Science Theater. I mean, clearly we've learned from this stream and the past one. I like to talk a lot, and that doesn't change when I'm watching movies. So to some people, they don't like to watch movies with me. But that was but yeah, I've been recommended it more than I must say like a dozen times, and I really want to check it out.
Yeah, in their 7th season, they went ahead and did a riff of Overdrawn the Memory Bank, and with the Academy Award-winning, internationally lauded Raul Julia in this ridiculous, made-for-TV, recorded on video cassette, with the cheapest sound effects you can imagine. In the middle of the movie, there's this pastiche of Casablanca. That's a theme that goes throughout it. It's laughable and amazing, like at the same time. It's crazy. It's wild. And one of the other things nuts about it is that he plays a character named Aram Fingal, right? Which, of course, Raul Julia was Puerto Rican, right? And he sounded Puerto Rican and he looked Puerto Rican because he was Puerto Rican. And I never picked up on it when I first saw Overdrawn. But years later, I started thinking about those name parts, and it's like a old bumpkin rural Scottish name. Like Fingal is the Scottish equivalent of Finn McCool or Finn McCumhale from the Irish legend cycle. Some of the Finian cycle, those stories were transported in the before 1000 to Scotland, and they have their own little flavor. And his name in the local vernacular is Fingal, and it's become like a name, a regular name there too. But it's just it's this weird Gaelic name that sounds like it's made up science fiction name, but it's not.
I
So
always I always love when these names turn out to be real.
every one of those things is just like it's such a perfectly bizarre movie. You honestly, and I think the uncut version of Overdrawn is on YouTube. At least it was a while back ago because I watched the original, like the uncut, just for kicks, because it's about 15 minutes longer, and then there's whole plot elements that get left out on the thing. It's pretty cool.
Okay, going back to Aquaman, Nanjo's is asking, is the hook hand Aquaman your favorite?
Sort of. Um, okay, so I definitely like the hook hand Aquaman, and not just because I kind of look like that at the moment, but the idea of Aquaman having been through some stuff, I find a really appealing character dynamic, and the idea, because one of the things about you think about how to phrase this. Okay, so if you go back to Aquaman in the 60s, right? Most comic books were written for 8-year-old boys, right? Aquaman was one of the only superhero comics whose major market was actually girls, right? And it was written with action and adventure, so boys could read it, but it was also written with a heavy emphasis on relationship and drama, so the girls would be interested. So it was actually like a cross-marketed book. And Ramona Frandon, who is an artist out of New York, and she actually got her start doing illustrations for fashion magazines. She ended up doing comics. And I'm not sure exactly how that happened. I mean, probably the comics were just paying a little better. But she defined a lot of the look of Atlantis from those early days. But anyway, one of the things that's remarkable about the Aquaman series back in the 60s was that it dealt with like super complicated relationship dynamics and drama in a vocabulary, both literal and a metaphorical vocabulary that young people could easily digest. So there was jealousy, and there was the concept of duty and all that kind of stuff that's just built in to the stories. That's really nuanced and involved in a way that like I never would have imagined until I went back and read them as an adult. There's just a lot of stuff to that. But from going from those early stories on, you have the marriage of Aquaman and Mera, and you have them develop, and they have a child, and the child is kidnapped and murdered, and they break down. Each of them individually break down, and so and that happened in the Aquaman book and in the Detective comics and in Adventure comics and all these cross books. So by the time you get to the beginning of the Peter David, Aquaman is just kind of he's been plugging along through this trial and this tribulation, and he started off being just a happy Namor. That was what Aquaman's character was designed to be. And so by the time you get to Peter David's writing, there's just so much weight and there's these changing roles and everything that I have a really hard time not saying that I just love it because it becomes thoroughly mythical, you know.
I'd say
And
that's one of the strongest points of Aquaman is like the world, Atlantis,
yeah.
the oceans.
And I mean, and it's a world that's both it's action and it's adventure and it's drama and it's legacy and it's myth and it's science fiction and it's all these things brought in together in a way that I love all of it. And one of the
even some politics, I'd say, like when they talk about invading the surface.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's some interesting things about that. I feel like that's how you put it in there, honestly. Is kind of the nuance. Or if there were allegories, like I don't know, but like when, for example, I'm thinking about Jeff Johns' Justice League, when there was the whole thing about Atlantis coming to, or Orn leading a charge to the surface, and there was a lot of drama about that. And I felt like that was well written and natural. When I say politics, I'm just referring to debates, not actually, Aquaman's just like, oh no, someone's using the wrong gender, or
right.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, you're actually talking about the nature of because I mean that's one of the things that like we misspeak a lot in our modern world today, and even amongst the comics Twitter community, people say, "Oh, I want politics in my stories," or "I don't want politics." And well, listen, Chippy, I hate to break it to you, but politics are inevitable. Politics are properly defined the affairs of humans in society, right? So you can't have apolitical anything. All stories are political. The question is, can they be honest? Can they be forthright? And can they be more universal in their appeal without being condemning? That's what you got to do. Are you writing propaganda or are you writing a story?
With depth, yeah. I just wanted to point out something that Scott had said in the chat that I thought was kind of funny regarding Aquaman. He says, going back to you talking about like the a lot of the big female readership, and he says, wait, Aquaman was made to be the better Ken, referring to Barbie. And I told him, like, when Ken can command the ocean, he might stand a chance. But
Aquaman was meant to be the happier Namor.
I've never liked Namor, honestly.
Well, I think it's there's a lot. I mean, I don't know. Namor is the original anti-hero, I mean, from the general reader's perspective. He was a zealot for a nation of isolationists that found themselves on the wrong side of international politics, and I really like the Namor story. The other thing about the hook-handed Aquaman, when Peter David came in the 90s, they redid Aquaman's origin story. And so in the original, in the Golden Age, Aquaman was the child of a scientist who had discovered the way to teach people to learn to breathe underwater. And he taught his son to breathe underwater and then had a tragic accident. And so the son had to finish raising himself as a wanderer in the undersea wasteland. And he didn't really belong to anyone or anything. He just kind of had his own thing. In the Silver Age, that was changed, and he was given an origin very similar to Namor's origin, right? So Namor's origin, and this is originally, was that he was the son of an Atlantean princess and of an American merchant marine. And they had a tryst. She went back to Atlantis and gave birth to a pink baby. And the pink baby was constantly mocked for being pink when all of his other people are blue. He's a half-breed and no one likes him. But he's also the prince. He's the next in line for the throne, and he's got a temper like you wouldn't believe. And he hates the upworld. So there's all this conflict in Namor's life. In the Silver Age, Aquaman's origin was that his dad was a lighthouse keeper, and his mother was the princess, and she was fleeing problems at home and came and fell in love with the lighthouse keeper. And they had a couple of years of happiness, and then she disappears, and Aquaman is raised by his dad, and has a great relationship with his dad, and his dad teaches him about being a man. And when he comes time to reach maturity, Aquaman, he knows he's got all these powers, and he goes out into the oceans to be a hero because he's got this ability. The Silver Age Aquaman story is very much like Namor's origin, except instead of being raised without a father, he was raised with a father and no mother. And so there's an interesting dynamic about a single parenting in that. But I never really cared for the Silver Age origin because it's too much like Namor's. And Aquaman was already created to be a happy Namor. So why accentuate that with the origin story? So Peter David came in and created a new origin in a miniseries called the Atlantis Chronicles. And the Atlantis Chronicles put together all of Aquaman's Atlantis' history in the DC Comics and made it into a single thing up until that point. And in it, there was his new origin for Aquaman was that Aquaman's mother was the queen, and she was lured into an affair with this ancient wizard who was named Atlan. And Atlan, through the use of his magics, convinced the queen to let him impregnate her. And then she's pregnant with somebody else's kid, and her husband, the king, says, well, we got to kill this kid. We can't have, somebody who's not my son as heir to the throne, and I'm only king by extension because my line to the ascension was not to the throne was not as clear as my wife's was, and so no baby. So they leave him up on a shore called Mercy Reef to be killed. And in addition, there was a big to do because Aquaman was born blonde, and that's a whole thing too. And so he was left on Mercy Reef to die, and he's rescued by dolphins, and he's raised Mowgli style by the dolphins. And then when he starts getting to the point where he's like 13, 14 years old, his dolphin mom says, okay, it's been great having you around, but now you're becoming a grown-up, whatever you are. You're not one of us, so you can't stick around. You have to go with your own kind. So here's some people over here. And he happens across Tom Curry, Lighthouse Keeper, who becomes his foster father and raises him from 13, 14 or whatever on to adulthood, and then to manhood. And so I always had liked that story. I thought that was I always thought that was the more compelling story until I saw the last Aquaman trailer, where he's got these great moments talking to his dad, got these great moments talking to his mom. They're talking about legacy. They're talking about duty. They're talking about this whole thing. And my heart just gets all weepy. Because as you know, Matt, I'm a father of 2 boys, right? My sons are very dear to me, and they're 15 and 17. So they're nearly out of the house, right? Just a few years away from my own little empty nest. And I tell you, man, thinking about the idea about making your dad proud and about being, all the stuff that you can be who you are because the legacy your parents passed down. I'm just sitting here wiping the tears out of my eyes, and I may have to recant the last 10 years of complaining that DC Comics under Jeff Johns reverted Aquaman to his Silver Age origin. That's a real damn compelling story at that point. Oh, hey, I'm the only one here. I just realized that. Viewers out there, I didn't know. Matt seems to have gone missing. I didn't realize in my ranting about this that he'd gone off here. Pardon me for a moment. I'm going to click through some screens, see if I can see what has become of my compatriot. Nope, don't see him on that one. Let's see over here. Got a message. Oh. Sorry, everybody. I just do not have a lot to say at the very minute. Um, I'm just going to keep talking. So, actually, give me a minute, and I will jump over to the screen and see if anyone has any questions, because I have been letting Matt do all of the fielding, but he's not here right now, obviously. So give me just a moment, and I apologize in advance. So, suffice to say, I am very excited about the possibility of the coming Aquaman movie next week. Not the possibility, it's definitely coming. I'm excited for what it could be. Hopefully it's great. I have heard some very mixed reviews about it, though, and that's kind of an interesting little dealio. So that's staring at myself, staring at the screen. That's ridiculous. I apologize, everybody. So, my internet nassered me. I was unfamiliar with that term. What does that mean? Okay, that's fine. Oh. Yeah, picture me scratching my psoriasis. Oh, your Wi-Fi is down. Oh, that's ridiculous. That's the worst. So, how do I do the stream without? How do I do the stream without my partner? That's crazy talk. So, I guess we could call it a day early. That seems silly, right? I don't know, man. I don't know. So, I am getting sick of looking at my own face, though. So, see who all is in the chat now. 4 watching, that's including me. So, a bunch of people have left. We got Scott. Thanks for showing up. There you go. That's a good point. Nacho was right. You should try resetting the router. But good chance that'll annoy everyone else at your house if somebody else didn't get kicked off. That's the real question. Okay, one thing in continuity about Aquaman, looking up there, that Aquaman doesn't control the water per se. He can communicate and cajole fish. Mera has the ability to manipulate the water using hard water constructs, and that's what makes them a good 1-2 punch, a good team. Because if they both could do that, then you wouldn't necessarily need both of them. One of the great things about the Aquaman and Mera stories, especially in the Silver Age and the Bronze Age, was that you have situations where Aquaman and Mera would just as likely rescue each other, right, as get rescued. So it's not that there was not a damsel in distress situation. Sometimes there was. Sometimes Mera is legitimately overcome, although she has more physical prowess because of her powers. She has to be aware of it, and she can get taken advantage of pretty easy that way. Contrary-wise, situation where if Aquaman, if he's overcome by something, then Mera, people underestimate her, and then she can come up and take care of business. So that's an interesting little side there. So we can still hang out in the chat. Problem is that I can't hear you say anything, and that makes it really awkward. Plus, looking at the delay of my own voice is awkward as hell. And I'm just going to stand there for a while so you see how long that delay is. So, okay. I have, without having somebody to riff off of, I'm kind of out of stuff to talk about. Does somebody have questions for me? Or would you guys like to see me color the next Forces page, which I have on my computer. If you have questions about forces, anything? We're good on the fix. Excellent. That's the story. Appreciate that, Matt. You go for it. That's what Mattriarchy is all about. Making the thing happen. Okay. Current Marvel and DC. I am really suspicious of Marvel. You've been seeing that thing, the history, uh, how do they phrase it? History is destroyed in March 2019. And it seems cheap. It seems really cheap. Absolutely. Absolutely they can. Okay. Minor villains can be taken seriously if written well. Trying to think of some really good examples is part of what it is, without going too far into it. First of all a writer has to do to write something seriously is to take it seriously, right? It's all common. I've heard about that. Cosmic ghostwriter, my friggin' ass. Yeah, Riddler is an example of a character that can be written really well. Another one is the Shade. The Shade was a splash villain in the Silver Age and the Golden Age. Just sort of a lark, just sort of thrown in his background, sort of somebody to fill things in. And then James Robinson got a hold of him and turned it into the best villain and best anti-hero in the late 90s DC universe. Maybe not the best. That might be too given too much, but he's an amazing character under James Robinson. That's also a good point. Punisher was a super minor villain, and they made him into a really, really good character. So Scott, you're kind of young, yeah? Have you ever had a chance to dig back into the Mike Baron or Chuck Dixon Punisher runs from the 90s? I mean, I guess some of that stuff's probably available through Marvel's subscription, online service, right? I don't know. But I hear that's a pretty good way to read back issues. Okay. Another example of if you are really well, I haven't read a ton of it, but what I have, I've been really impressed with. And I also have had Punisher Max has got some good stuff in there too. Think is that the stuff Garth Ennis? Is that on the Max title? I think it was, and that was some really good stuff. Although, truth be told, I prefer those stories when they were Hitman stories. A lot of it was this similar shtick, except it was different main character. Tommy Monaghan, the Hitman for DC. Tommy took himself not so seriously. But it is really good. Well, you and me will keep that on the down low. How's that, Scott? But yeah, Garth Ennis's run on Punisher was pretty awesome. Another character, another example of people taking minor characters and doing them really well. Actually, The Long Halloween by us. Oh, come on. Forgetting what it was. The Long Halloween and Dark Victory. And they were the thematic sequels to Batman Year One, which that's a whole story. I don't want to just get into that too terrible much because that's publication history, and that's only interesting to some people. And I've kind of gone on about that like a lot tonight already. I find this stuff fascinating, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. Anyway, but Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale have tons of B villains in those stories that get played for a lot of weight for it. It's really great, and it chronicles the changing of Gotham from being a mob centric underworld to being a supervillain centric underworld. Very good stuff. But also, back in the day, many, many years ago, actually almost 20 years ago now, I was a staff writer for a DC Comics fan magazine called Fanzine. In fact, I will see if I can do this here.
Hello?
Oh, hey, you're back.
Let's see. Oh, I think I've got my other YouTube account or my other account hooked up to this right now. But yeah. For some reason, my dad's Surface Pro, it has access to the internet. Nothing else does.
That's friggin' hilarious.
So, yeah, I'm very sorry about that, though. That was kind of unexpected.
So, anyway, what I just said was I was talking about somebody asking about can minor villains be great characters. I was about ready to say that back in the day, I was a staff writer for an online fan magazine called Fanzine. And there is a series of stories. Actually, all of the stuff I wrote was with minor characters pretty much. Fanfics, which not everybody's into fanfics, but one of the best, a series called Chicken Soup for the Supervillain's Soul. And when the whole thing was written in such a way, it was written from minor supervillains to other characters, and it's just really a heartfelt action drama. It's really good stuff. So,
well, now I'm gonna have to check that out with all my found free time.
All of your free time. Yeah, fanzine.com. I tried putting a link, but it's just
it popped up in the chat.
So, yeah, I went back to the chat to see what's going on. I'll probably drop out now because it says there's 6 people watching. I know that's not true. So, because I shouldn't count what I do here.
They're talking about Bane now in the chat.
Got a complete ops treatment. Oh, dude. Scott, you are 100% right about that. And I'll give you 3 words as to why that happened. Batman and Robin. He was just used. I mean, it wasn't long after Nightfall that movie came out, and he was just a throwaway character in that in a luchador mask, and it was terrible. And what I saw of him in the animated series did a pretty decent job. Maybe not great, but a decent job of explaining the character without going into the whole Nightfall thing. But you can't live down the horrible Bane in Batman and Robin. It's just impossible.
I don't know. Horrible kind of goes hand in hand with that entire movie.
Well, yeah, some of that movie is there because it was funny, but let's face it, it's still sort of a blight.
Nacho says still looks better than Dark Knight Bane. I feel like Dark Knight Bane was a completely different person. Like, I mean, well, I'm not the biggest fan of the Dark Knight movies. I feel like it kind of took a lot of what I liked out of the Batman world and made it a little too realistic for my tastes.
Yeah. I feel really mixed about the Dark Knight Bane. Mostly, I think I liked so much about him, but what I disliked was that he was not like the mastermind, right? He was just another toady with a good stage presence, and that sucks, man. That sucks.
I remember the first time I saw him, and I was like, "Wait, is that supposed to be Bane?" And because they're going for a more realistic approach, they had to play down the luchador. The Venom's really not in the movie.
And
Wrong guy.
the thing about the thing that's worst about it, from my sake on that, is that they didn't really address they extricated that whole piece from his persona. And I'm not the biggest Mexican wrestler fan, but I mean, it was just that was part of Bane, and when you just extract that off, it's just sad. It's just sad.
I mean, there is stuff to enjoy there. Like for as everyone likes to make jokes about it, I think the Tom Hardy's performance is pretty enjoyable.
So Hardy's perform.
It doesn't really fit what I want for the character, but I liked what he did, I guess.
Yeah, Scott's right about using the cartoon origin for Mr. Freeze. The funny thing about that, Scott, is that that's actually the only real origin for Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze, as existed prior to the Batman animated series, basically didn't have an origin. He was just a scientist or something that had couldn't exist outside of freezing cold temperatures and wanted to freeze everything and steal out diamonds. There was there was no complexity to it. It was weird. And so
the 60s, that was when that stuff would fly. You didn't need an explanation. You just needed, and I will rule the world with my overwhelming evil.
There's definitely something to be said for the simplicity of that. But a lot of that's just because there wasn't. It wasn't intended to be anything out of it. It was just real super simple. So okay. Adam West was in Freeze's house. Yeah. In the '60s series.
I'm still shaken up about Adam West being gone.
That is weird, but I mean, it happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's just part of the natural cycle. Batman and Robin, Mr. Freeze, and Poison Ivy teaming up didn't make sense. You know what else didn't make sense? The Bat credit card or the nipples on everyone's costumes. Like even Mr. Freeze has nipples. Like I've seen this movie several times, so I remember one time I was watching with my little brothers, and I was like, "Wait, Freeze has nipples too?" And sure enough, I zoomed in a bit, and he has what is it called? Highlighted nipples, just like the rest of them.
I guess I had not noticed that.
You have to look a little harder than the rest of them. I mean, he doesn't get a putting my armor on nipple close up.
I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch it just for that. Thanks.
Well, oh man, when I was a kid, I actually did like that movie. But to me, that's one of those things that makes sense to like when you're a kid. Like you see some stuff and you're like, "Oh wow, that's cool." But then as you get older, you're like, "Why did I ever like this?"
Yeah. There's so unrelated to Batman per se, and I'm gonna jump off the stream with my face because I think I'm done being on with my face. But oh crap, I can't do that yet. When Star Wars Episode 1 came out, now of course you were an infant when this happened.
I was a wee lad.
So you aren't going to remember this as a thing. But when Episode 1 came out, it was shaking. It was gut wrenching to a lot of the old nerds, right? Because it was kind of not awesome. From lengthy debates about procedural politics.
Yeah, that's exactly the type of politics I was talking about earlier. Was the Aquaman stuff was interesting. A lot of the Star Wars, like you can pretty much sum up the Star Wars prequels with the Council will not stand for this, and then some corny lines of the memorable lines about sand and silly things like that.
Yeah, well, that whole thing about sand. That's not even.
That was the second movie, but
whole thing. But yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, it was.
But anyway, when what it was is some of my friends were just like, was it ever good? Maybe I was just wrong. Maybe it was really bad and I just couldn't see it because I was a child. Maybe it was childhood that blinded me. Just like I used to think The Ugly Dachshund was a good movie, which was a 60s era Disney story about a Saint Bernard. But no, it wasn't a Saint Bernard. It was a Great Dane. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, not just
I had seen Star Wars when I was already grown, so I was able to tell my friends, no, the originals were classic. Trust me, it really is good.
Yeah, the sad thing is looking at the prequels and pretty much, everything kind of, or not the extra universe material, like the cartoon, like the Clone Wars cartoon was really well put together, but the movies, like you look at them and you see so many really cool ideas and like things that could have been so much better if they were executed a little more thoughtfully. Like I don't know, for me, one of my favorite things of all Star Wars that comes out of the prequels is General Grievous. I think that's such a cool character. He collects the lightsabers of the guys he's killed. He's he's a cyborg. All his organs are like pumping inside of his chest. I just thought in the way that he moved and everything, I loved it. But the movie wasn't about him. It was about the council will not stand for this, and a whole lot of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's some definite missteps in all of that. Now, have you ever had the chance to follow? There's a YouTube channel out there called Belated Media, and it's a guy who does movie reviews about movies that have been out for a while. He did a series of 3 videos called "What If Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3 Were Actually Good." He goes through and he breaks down things that he thinks are missteps in the plot and ways that they could be a little different while keeping the spirit of what was intended in there. It's pretty freaking dynamic. It's pretty
yeah, Scott says there are no bad stories, only bad execution. And I think to an extent I agree. I think there are some stories that like are probably doomed from the get-go, or at least in any possible way I could think of them. But I think
there are some stories that are not interesting.
Yeah, but execution is really key.
But execution is hugely key. But I mean, there are some. What I mean to say is, like, I can sit here, and I have tonight. And I actually kind of stopped myself. Like, I can tell you the story about the production history of Batman year 2 and 3. Right? I could go on for quite a while about this topic because I know about it and I find it vastly interesting. But if I were to do that, it would not take long before people stopped listening.
Oh no, I think that we just had like a really big Pope fire following that was here for her.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then they just went, phew.
I did appreciate it though. Like having 10 people come to listen to what 2 guys named Matt have to say is kind of humbling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I cannot. I'm going to have to, after we're done here, go on a rant about how wonderful it was to have her come down, because it was quite kind. I really appreciated it.
I felt like I came off a little rude with my joke at the beginning about having a memorable name, but she was really kind. I mean, I loved having her here.
Yeah. She's, like I said, she's nearly persuaded me.
The Mace Windu came along and screwed. Yeah. Okay. Mace Windu was another character I actually really liked from the prequels. Well, namely because when you're a little kid, you see a purple lightsaber and you think that's awesome. But I feel like he did, like, Samuel L. Jackson was something that really stood out with those movies.
Yeah. I think there is a lot to be said for just so much about those pictures. But they are still, they're not perfect by any stretch. So, and everyone says that 3 was the best, but 3 was also the easiest because you know where it has to end.
Yeah, I guess it was all kind of put together for them.
Yeah, I mean, because it's 3 ends where 6 begins in a lot of ways. So, and it may be too much too. They kind of projected stuff that was a little silly.
Yeah, Darth Maul brings up nachos. Yeah, Darth Maul was a cool character. It's another thing when you're a little kid, you're like, "Whoa, a two-ended or a double-ended lightsaber," but visually he was very disturbing. I think when I was little, I used to say that I used to think that he kind of looked like the devil, or if I were to see the devil, that's what he would kind of look like.
Yeah, and that was actually part of the intention. That was intentional.
Oh, and then the battle music is something, that was incredible. The piece that plays when they're fighting Darth Maul.
Indeed.
Let's see. And Scott says, except Attack of the Clones, may God rest that movie. That's like the one that I have the least interest of going back to watch them, because over the years I've seen them again, and the second one is always the one that I don't really think about all too much.
I'm trying to think. I avoided buying the second one for a number of years, but I ended up purchasing it because I wanted to watch the riff tracks of it. And I got a sale on the Blu-ray of the 3 prequel movies, so it's hard to say no when you're getting something.
Scott says he's glad that Maul got the chicken legs in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, I did praise the Clone Wars. I've never actually seen the show the whole way through. I've seen a couple episodes here and there, but the production value was very high.
Yes,
was kind of the point that I was bringing up. Although it is on my list, it's on my to-dos.
And Filoni, the producer, the guy breathes Star Wars. So I mean, that's one of those things too. That's just amazing about that.
Fondest memories of watching the originals with my dad when I was a kid, says Nacho. One of my fondest memories actually with Star Wars comes from the prequels, because I remember there was a point where I think the second movie or the third movie was close to coming out. And my grandfather, who in a way kind of looked like Count Dooku, I guess, but he actually had the Count Dooku lightsaber, and we were all sword fighting with him. We're playing with lightsabers. So I guess that's one of my favorite memories linked to Star Wars. Let's see. Nacho's quoting, in my point of view, the Jedi are evil.
Oh my god.
That is not what you expect at all. Looking at Darth Vader, is
yeah. No, that was I actually got to kind of feel sorry for both Jake Lloyd and Hayden Christensen. They both of them got kind of a lot of flack from the fan community at the time. It wasn't really deserved, because both of them were given ridiculous tasks.
I think I've made a mistake now. Nachos is writing out the sand quote in the chat. Oh, what was that? Nachos actually wanted to ask you about, what was it? Egg custard tarts or something like that. Something very British.
So, custard is, of course, like a pudding. Well, nachos from Britain, they call pudding is something different than what we call pudding, right? So, like a baked bread dessert is a pudding there, or other things. In America, we have there's a custard made of gelatin and cream or milk. That's what we call pudding.
The snack attack pudding or whatever it is.
Exactly, exactly. And it's technically what you'd call a custard, but traditional custard uses egg as the stiffener, right? Whereas what we call puddings are the same thing, but instead of using egg, it uses gelatin as the stiffener. Of course, gelatin, as you may or may not know, is made from processed hooves.
I always thought, or when I learned that, it really weirded me out.
Yeah, yeah. It is one of the weirder things about a human society, I think. And I don't think that's even overstating it too much.
Hmm.
It's pretty freaking weird. Anyway,
Do you remember the Teletubbies? Because that's whenever I hear the word custard, I think of Tubby custard. If you ever had to sit through Teletubbies with your kids,
I'm vaguely familiar with Teletubbies, meaning my sons were old enough to be in the target audience, and I sometimes watched it, but I could never watch it for very long.
it's a trip, man.
Yeah, you're 100% right on that. And then like there's this weird stuff in there that you're trying to figure out, is this gender politics or is this just because kids are silly?
I thought it was just like a bunch of barely, or like these thoughts just kind of barely linking together. Like, something happens and oh, it's a bag, it's a ball, it's a really weird sequence. Now there's children.
Yeah, it's pretty tripped out.
Not just as egg custard tarts are the best.
Yeah, well, and a tart. I think we talked about last week that pie, as we know it today, is an American invention, right? But the flaky crust that we use in pies is not an American invention. They had that in meat pies and stuff back in Europe for a long, long time. Tarts are a little dessert made with a flaky crust, and tarts existed before what we call pies. My understanding on that's right. And so custard tarts they're custard, they're the egg pudding, right? That is baked inside of the shell, and it's all together in this little. Well, some of them are big, some of them are bite sized, some of them are hand sized, like a hand pie kind of a thing. And so that's what I know about egg custard tarts.
So yeah, he says, and he follows up to my little tirade about Teletubbies. He says Tinky Winky was gay. And I think, well, I mean, did he choose the name Tinky Winky for himself, or did his parents kind of hate him?
See, I actually have a different theory about that. I don't believe that the Teletubbies reproduce sexually.
What, they have like seeds in a packet? They're like
I think they may seed. I think they may seed. Yeah, I think they may.
They're mushroom people. They're spores.
Because their existence is utterly foreign, right? So I don't think there's any reason to presume that they have anything that we would recognize as gender.
Well, I guess that would make sense. Although I think, if I remember this correctly, like there were pronouns for different ones, or for different Teletubbies. Like some of them were referred to as he's, and some of them were referred to as she.
Yeah. That's true. But there was 2 boys and 2 girls, but they didn't have the same kind of relationships dynamics as people have, and I think they weren't supposed to be people in the same. I mean, they're beings and intelligence and things, but I don't think they're supposed to be as analogous there. So I don't think Tinky Winky can be gay. I think he can just be fantastic.
I do feel it's. You imagine though, like in the hospital, it's like your baby boy, and it's like I'm gonna name him Tinky Winky.
That's the one.
So
Martha, I've made my mind up. You shall be Tinky Winky.
He gets like in a court, he gets court summons or something. It's like, what is your name? Tinky Winky. And, the judge is just like.
Are you familiar with the Boy Named Sue?
Yeah, that classic story.
Yep, classic song.
Yeah. Oh, Scott says, what if the Teletubbies are evolved brine shrimp, like sea monkeys?
I can easily buy into that, frankly, Scott. I think that's a very real possibility within our universe.
Yeah, although I think that the reason he brings that up is because there was a video that was trending everywhere about like 4 weeks ago about it's like the dark history of sea monkeys, and apparently like the guy who created sea monkeys or really just had the idea to market brine shrimp was actually like a really really racist guy or something like that. But I was just really more fascinated, like that it was weird like in and of itself, but like I was really fascinated with the whole thing of sea monkeys because as a kid I thought it was just like, oh, sea monkeys, well, there must be like this rare species, and then they fall out of popularity as time goes on, and I look back and I'm just like, did they go extinct or something? Did we sell them out of existence? And then yeah, it turns out they're just brine shrimp. Nacho says, "What about Tots TV?" I'm gonna guess that's a British thing. Is that like Nick Jr.? Is it like a channel?
I'm not aware of Top TV, so I can't really comment on it at all.
Well, I mean, I hope, or I'm betting. Oh, oh, Scott says someone took nano machines and they infused them with brine shrimp, not only to get the picture on the to get the picture on the packet, but something more. Oh, the talk about the Teletubbies. It's great. It's a show. They're scary ass puppets, is what Nacho says.
Oh, I see.
It was or Nachos is guilty by proxy because we all know that guilt by association is the way to go. But his nation spawned Peppa Pig, so we're allowed to call him names.
I'm not really familiar with Peppa Pig much because my boys are too old for that. So
I had little siblings up until, or like really little siblings like up until the past couple of years. So speaking of scary ass puppets, like one thing that always weirded me out was people that were scared of the Muppets. Like, did you ever know kids that were like that?
Yes.
Where the Muppets and Sesame Street, or not? I think it's mostly the Muppets, but the Muppets scare them, and to me, I can't see it.
I shouldn't say I've known people that were generally scared of the Muppets. We had Muppets around our stuff all the time when my boys were little because we watched the DVDs of the show because my wife and I grew up with it, right? So it was just part of our existence. So we shared that with our kids. And didn't really think anything about it. One moment. Whoa. Oh, no, that was ridiculous. And they had this big old poster of all a bunch of those Muppets that was hanging up in the kids' room. And do you know who Uncle Deadly is? The Muppet Uncle Deadly.
Describe their appearance.
He looks kind of like a gargoyle. He was also the Phantom of the Muppet Show in his first appearance.
I don't think or it's not coming up to me. We used to be scared of, what was the really large Muppet that was like really brown
Sweetums. Sweetums.
Yeah, like I remember there was an episode of the Muppet Show where he was like eating people or something. And
that actually wasn't Sweetums. That was a different one. There were a few really big ones.
But I can't remember the name of him. But yeah, that scared me as a kid. Watch it because we had back when Netflix was really all about getting DVDs. We got Muppet Show DVDs, and I remember that episode scared me.
Yeah, but anyway, let me see. I found some images of Uncle Deadly, and just a second here to share that. I'm back. There we go.
And let's see, dramatic drum roll. They're down here talking about a show called Horrible Histories. I have never heard of this show, and now they're quoting it, talking about stupid deaths. I'm gonna guess they're singing the theme song for this segment. Oh no, I don't think I've ever seen this fellow.
So that there is Uncle Deadly, and he was on the poster that we had, and he was only on a couple of episodes back in the original series, and he's been in other stuff since then. But my son was terrified of this guy in the lineup on the poster. He just, because he's got this kind of monsterish look to him, looks like a gargoyle, and my oldest boy was scared of this guy, but he never told us about it. And he just said, I know it's silly, and I don't want to bother anyone because it's just a poster and I know it, but he freaks me out. And I didn't know about it until years later. We pulled the poster out of their room because it had gotten torn on the wall. And then he told us, I used to be really scared of that poster. I was like, what?
It's weird that you scroll far enough down on Google Images, you start getting quotes or you start getting pictures from Evil Dead 2 alongside Resident Evil 7 guides.
Yeah, that happened.
But yeah, I've never seen this Muppet before.
Yeah.
And then there's Uncle Ruckus from the Boondocks showing up.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Anyway, let's see. Scott says he's got a really interesting design. He looks like an old dragon.
Yep. That was the idea for sure.
But yeah, they're down there they were having a ball with the stupid deaths. Well, now I'm gonna have to look that up in my own time.
Oh, hey, you guys, I might as well go and mention now, since we probably ought to get to wrapping up the stream before too much longer. Is that, and I don't know, but next Wednesday at 6 o'clock Mountain Time, I'm going to be a guest on the Needle Mover Society's stream, and I'm going to be talking about Expositioner. So I've been asked on to give a pitch for our upcoming crowdfund. I don't know if you guys, how many of you guys up there in the chat actually care about my comics, or just here to hear Matt talk, which is fine. But I am going to talk about my comics a little bit. Share that we're going to be on the Needle Mover Society, be talking about a Exposition or Vox Populi. So,
I'm excited. One thing about streaming. So I think I'm going to be out of town starting next week, so I won't be able to do a stream during next week or next Thursday.
okay.
But I'm going to try to work this into my schedule so it can keep being a regular thing, because I love coming out here and hanging out with all of you guys.
Well, I will. I'm probably going to carry on next week, although I might not the week after, that actual Christmas week, I think I may take off. But I think I will try to see if I can't find another Matt to come on, talk about stuff.
Go find Matt Trin, pull him if you can.
Yeah, I think that's my go-to there.
Just,
pretty sure I can. If he's free, I think I may be able to lure him into a conversation about science fiction. So, and
then get him to rope Brett in as well, because Brett, I think, works on Thursdays, which is unfortunate, but I think it'd be really fun to have him in here, either in the chat or on the show.
We've been missing each other several times because I know, like, he's got a set schedule stuff he already does, and I think he's available sometimes on Sundays. But I've also decided I'm not going to stream on Sundays at all until February. I just need to make sure I have some me time, because when we get our crowdfund off the ground February 1st, it's gonna be all full steam ahead. So,
So, are you going to be doing?
We really want people to be interested in this comic about our outlaw street detective and his bunny trail trip to discover the secret of the monsters that are destroying his city. So,
I like that. I like it.
Yeah.
So you're just gonna be the writer, or are you gonna be doing the art, or?
I'm writing and lettering it. The penciler is Rico, who also does the warehouse and does the pencils and inks for Joe Jobs. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have followed that at all. That's up on our Patreon.
I've seen it quite a bit. Like I remember, it's something you did plugs about because I remember I was asking you at one point about your career, and you would it's like, yeah, and I spent a little bit of time doing some Joe Jobs, and then you were like Snicker or something in parenthesis.
Yeah, that is true. That happened. But yeah, and which is part of our inspiration for that one. But yeah, Rico's doing the pencil work for Vox Populi, and then Barry is doing the inks and the colors for it. And I'll be going back and doing the dialogue as well as the story. But it is, even though Rico's been making comics for about a year and a half now, his stories are not action stories. And so this is his first action story. So we're doing it kind of a hodgepodge of storytelling method with it, where I gave him plot outline. And I said, okay, here's your page by page plot outline. And instead of like strict Marvel style, where the artist just fills all the gaps in and then the writer comes in and makes the dialogue make sense, what we do is we talk about what are the beats we want on the page, and then lay out a kind of a elucidate on the outline and how we can make these things happen. And then I never know what the end result's going to quite be, because then he'll come back. Rico will come back with a page that's maybe not what I had in mind, but that's just fine because it looks pretty good. And then we move on from there. So it's been really an interesting trip on that.
The warehouse, just to be sure, it's the cute animals in prison.
Yes, it is.
I loved that. I think I've at one point when I think the first time I saw you share it in, I had like read every single little strip of that. I thought it was hilarious.
It's remarkable.
But yeah, I like his style, especially for something like that. Let me just see. Oh, we're talking about in the chat. We were talking about they were talking about horrible histories, and they said it was a show that used to be a majority historic fact for a sketch comedy show that was first aimed at kids, resonated with stoned 20-year-olds, and then the show managed to win Best Comedy Sketch Show. Well, now, like, all this stuff you guys point me to is, geez, I don't think you'll ever be able to experience it all within a lifetime. Nachi says, yeah, the songs are great. And he says, but I'm not a stoner. And I said, I'm not a stoner, but the Sonic movie might make me. You've seen the stuff for the Sonic the Hedgehog movie around Twitter?
I've seen the advertising stills, but that's all.
Oh, yeah. And
I can't understand how people care enough to care about that. I just don't get it.
To me, it just seems like a recipe for disaster with the plot or with the premise alone. But you never know. They could make a decent movie. It could shock everybody. Like the Lego movie, to me, was a licensed movie that I absolutely loved. And at first glance, you might think that's really a tacky marketing based movie. And no, it was actually had a lot of heart and it was really funny. Especially the Lego Batman movie, which you would think would be even more tacky and marketing based. I feel like is one of the funniest movies I've seen within the past several years. But yeah, it could surprise you. I don't think it's likely. But yeah, he says he's surprisingly excited for it. It might be a guilty pleasure, and I say I'm so mixed. It's kind of tearing me apart. And Nacho says his feet are on the guy's head in the one promotional image, it might be a promotional image, or I think that's the leaked photo. They had a leaked photo of what Sonic actually looks like in the film. And it's not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. But yeah, he has his feet on the guy's head because of the way that the photo is set up. Yeah, I don't know.
That's funny.
Were you ever into what you must have been probably around like 13 years old when the Genesis came out.
We didn't have the kind of scratch to be into new game systems or anything. That's about the time that we found that we got our Atari 3600. So, I had friends who had that kind of stuff, and that was really cool. And back in the day, they used to have like video game systems that just were on display at like Walmart. And you just walk up and play a Genesis because it was just sitting out or whatever, or a Game Gear. So I played a little bit whenever we were at like Target or Walmart or whatever.
They still kind of have those. I mean, I don't feel like they're as common, but every once in a while you'll go to Walmart and they have them with Xbox One and stuff like that.
Yeah, when the Xbox One first came out, there was one.
Yeah, the Sonic movie, and I feel bad because my girlfriend loves those sorts of things, and she was like, "Oh," because she liked the Chipmunks movie and everything like that. So she saw they were gonna make a Sonic movie in the same vein, and she was excited. And then, as like some of the promotional images came out, she had sent me the clip from SpongeBob, where Patrick's parents are just like, "Marty, I'm scared."
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I love her.
I got a notepad here just a little bit. I got one quick story to tell you, talking about conflicts over movies. First ask the question, what is your feelings there about the Twilight films?
I never really wanted to touch them with a 39.5-foot pole. Oh, if that kind of gives an idea.
My sister got really into the movies and really into the books. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, she used to be a girl from a broken home, and she had a lot of conflicted feelings about that because reasons. And so she felt a certain kinship with the characters in the story. And I hated it. And
it's really angsty.
The first movie, and it was so bad. And the second movie came out, and one time my sister was up, and we were talking about something, and I said, I don't understand the appeal of this movie at all. He says, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Look, here's the ticket, right? In the movie, you've got a situation. You have a girl, and this girl has to make a decision about who she's in love with. The boy that thinks she smells like a snack all the time, or the boy that thinks she smells like a snack just 3 days a month."
Yeah.
That's so mad at me. She started crying.
Oh,
I just broke her.
That's when I feel like, when you say stuff like that, like you never anticipate that something like that's gonna happen. But even if you recognize it's kind of a bit of an overblown reaction, you still feel really bad about it.
Yeah. And on the one hand, I felt this is because I'm a terrible person. But on the one hand, I felt like upset that I'd upset my sister. On the other hand, I was laughing at my own joke and knowing that if I got this reaction, it was a really good zinger. Yeah, I am in fact a terrible person.
Nah, I don't like. I feel like those words get thrown around way too easily. Talk about grace when we were talking about grace the other day. The world needs more of that, and I think using terms like terrible person or describing someone as a bad, like irredeemable person,
Well, I think it's one thing to. I think there's a difference between the judgment you apply to somebody else and the judgment you
apply to yourself. I do feel like people tend to be very hard on themselves. Like, in my experience, granted, I haven't known you for all too long, but yeah, I'd say you're a good guy. I'd say Nacho and Scott
And
is.
the other side of it you have to look at too is I have a very grim view of humanity. I think there's the mark of perfection, and that is for the divine. And then there's the mark of attainable, and then there is all
Where
of us
we are.
here that aren't even trying for what we can attain, and still, if we attain to the peak we are, we still fail at perfection. And so, you know, yeah, I relish Schadenfreude a little too much to be what I would consider a good person. But at the same time, you know, I got to, you know, get one life, and sometimes you just got to take the laughs where you get them, I suppose. And sometimes you make your sister cry. So
My view on the whole thing is there are good people, there are bad people. You try to be the best you can be.
yeah,
Like I feel like that's kind of a simplistic way of looking at things because you know, like I grew up very religious, Catholic family. So we do think about a lot of what is good and what is holy, but you know, at the same time, my mind just kind of gravitates towards thinking, you do your best, and in the end, I think that's what, or that's good enough.
Yeah.
Nacho says I have a typical English view on these things, and I don't know what he means by that.
Yeah, that actually is a super complicated and interesting topic for conversation because I'd love to get into the nature of good at some point. Not to steal anything from Doug TenNapel, but I have loved some of his conversations on that, and I'd love to mirror that occasionally on our show. Which, granted, is usually just comments about me showing off what I know or being a dick. That's okay.
No, I think you haven't walked into dick territory yet.
Well, give me a little time. We had a late today.
I'll beat you there. And when I get there, you're gonna owe me a soda.
So, hey, viewers out there in the ether, I'm going to go ahead and kill the stream here in a little bit because I got to go get my kids and go to the dad thing. Thanks for tuning in. You guys stuck through the whole thing. It was great having you. Spread the word. The matriarchy shall rise again. We are going to be here next week in some shape, but it looks like Matt himself will be gone. So we'll have to see what that shape that looks. And
I'll still be on Twitter, just so that you guys know. Like, I'll still be alive and well. I just won't be able to stream next week.
And who knows? Maybe he'll jump into the chat for half an hour to say,
"Oh,
hey.
hopefully I could." I'm just gonna be with family a lot, and I'm gonna try to spend as much time with them as I can.
Yeah, that's important. That's important. So I don't want to take that away. I mentioned before, you get one shot at life, and take it where you can. So. Okay, guys, thanks for tuning in. Merry Christmas if we don't come in next week, because that's coming up. So, later.